And thank you for joining us, and welcome to another jam-packed episode of My Favorite Conservative. I am Edward.
And I am Andrea, but I am not conservative.
You're not?
No, but he is my favorite conservative.
Oh, thank you.
Aw. All right, Edward, what are we talking about today?
Oh boy, a lot going on in the world. A lot.
Yes.
I think we all know that.
Although we did vow, I said we would not talk about college campuses today.
That's true,
Because
yeah.
it's been
Done to death?
Yes, it has been done to death.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot going on in the world. We got Ukraine at war with Russia, of course. We got Israel at war with Hamas. But we're going to discuss our border crisis because it actually ties in with those two things going on.
Really?
It does.
Oh, it does?
It does.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. He's being serious. I'm joking. But so how does our border crisis, or catastrophe is what it really is, tie in with those two wars?
Well, I'm glad you asked.
Yeah, well, I know. Of course.
Thank you. Well, because the White House wants more spending for those wars.
Okay.
And is supposedly willing to improve security at our southern border to get that money.
Okay.
So think
All
about
right.
that.
Tit for tat. All right. I got it. Okay. So the only way the Biden administration is going to do something about our border is if Congress gives money to Ukraine and Israel.
Yeah. And wait, there's more. There's money for Taiwan too.
You're kidding.
No, we're an endless bank. We just
printing. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, so I just want to add here, I've always been this way, and I didn't know it was a very libertarian policy when I was young, but I just don't understand why we don't take care of our own first. I don't. And there was a time that we did that. So can you give us a little history lesson here without sounding like a professor?
In terms of immigration?
Yeah, the history of immigration, because we didn't used to be like this.
Yeah. I mean, let's start like in 1900. So from 1900 to 1920 was the huge immigration of our time. We actually let in 24 million new immigrants, and they came mostly from Europe, through Ellis Island, and we needed the people here. We actually needed settlers.
As a young country.
Yeah, we were growing,
industrial
considerably.
age.
Right. We were just starting an industrial age. We needed workers. We needed settlers to head, the Midwest and out west.
So that makes it like more than 1 million immigrants a year.
Oh yeah.
At the time.
Yeah, that was huge numbers because obviously we weren't that big of a country at that time.
Right.
Population-wise, yeah.
So the border was closed at what point? So we let in 24 million immigrants, and for 20 years.
Right. That ended in 1920, right?
In 1920. Why?
Right. Well, we went through the Roaring '20s. So from 1920 to 1965.
Okay.
45 years.
Wow.
We actually had no immigration in this country. And in fact, some years we actually had a negative immigration or migration, if you will. Yeah. Some people actually left. Yeah.
And so, and this was a time where it was considered a very isolationist policy.
It was. I mean, but we had been through, World War II,
World War I
and whatnot. World War I was already over.
Right.
But yeah, we went through World War II. We went through Korea. But the main reason that it was instituted is they wanted those 24 million people to become Americans, to understand what it means. Yeah, you can still be proud of your home country and your heritage where you came from, but you needed to understand what the American dream was, the American values were. And I think that was the main driving force to assimilate these people.
Wow. And I want to put a little call out here that we are going to be having some interviews in the future. And there are a few immigrants that I think could really speak about this, recent immigrants.
Sure.
Who went through it the correct way, the legal way. So what changed? We did this for 45 years, isolationist. We're not letting any more people in. What changed in the mid-60s?
Well, that'd be 1965. We can thank Senator Edward Ted Kennedy for leading the charge to reopen our borders. He got support from a lot of Republicans because.
So there was bipartisan support in 1965 to open the border.
To reopen for cheap labor is the main thing. Yeah, the Republicans, the business people at the time, they needed the farming was, really getting much bigger in the West and the Southwest and whatnot. And most of the new immigrants came from Central and South America, which we see now. Pretty much
that
the
was
same
that
thing.
was my next question.
Yeah.
Was it like it was before, or was it primarily our southern border?
No, this now we switched mostly to the southern border. And in fact, 1965, we went from zero immigration to 320,000 people in 1 year, which
wow,
that's a big jump. Yeah.
Okay, and then did that continue year over year?
It did. I mean, there was a big change in the late 70s with Jimmy Carter. At the time when people were here working on a green card, and there were a lot of legal, we let in a lot of legal immigrants with green cards every
Right.
year. But every year you would have to register again with the government, check in, tell them where you are, what you're doing, who you're employed with, all that sort of stuff. And Jimmy Carter thought that was maybe, I guess, the early phase of racial profiling, perhaps. Maybe, I don't know what his rationale
Okay.
was, but he changed the policy to, yeah, don't worry about checking in anymore, and which leads to a free for all of immigration.
Wow. Okay. And
Yeah.
so I can imagine, however, that everything changed when President Ronald Reagan was elected, right? I mean, surely President Reagan closed the border.
Yeah, as much as I love the great Ronald Reagan, this was one of his Achilles heels, where he wanted to get some other things done legislatively, and the only way that he could get it done was to. Remember now, the House had been controlled by Democrats for 40 years
Right.
straight, so he didn't have a majority anywhere, and he had to negotiate a amnesty program of 3 million illegals to get what he wanted through with his defense spending and whatnot. But
I just want to jump in.
Mhm.
I was in junior high then, and I remember this. I mean, I wasn't able, but I remember this being on TV all the time, that Reagan had betrayed the Republican Party. And
yeah, well, he
I remember
traded, supposedly he's going to allow 3 million illegals to become citizens,
right, the path to
on the
citizenship.
promise that the Democrats would secure the border.
What happened?
Yeah, to me, it reminds me of the movie Animal House. Do you remember that?
Oh,
Remember
love the
Animal
movie.
House?
Yes, great film. Great film.
Let's see, the big fat kid Flounder, who was a legacy. And if you remember in the movie, that the frat boys wanted his brother's car because they wanted to put it in a parade and a float and whatnot, and they totally screwed it up. And he was just flabbergasted and said, "What did you do?" And they looked at him and they said, "You screwed up. You trusted us." That's the way I feel Democrats said to Reagan, like, "You actually trusted us, really?"
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get back to present time. 21st century, right? 21st, yes.
Yeah.
A little tired.
Still. Yes.
And so what is happening right now on our border?
Yeah, well, that's the reason for the show today. I refer to our friend Neil Monroe over at Breitbart.com.
We'll tag you, Neil, and we'll put you in the show notes.
Wrote a great article, and he starts out with President Joe Biden's border chief has a deal for the GOP. He will carefully cap illegal migration at 1 million a year.
So back to the turn of the 20th century.
Yeah, illegal.
Yes.
Migration at 1 million a year if the GOP approves $61 billion for the war in Ukraine. So this offer would double pre-2021, meaning pre-Joe Biden immigration numbers. But it's a good faith offer, said one of the 4 GOP negotiators, the senators that are negotiating. Yeah.
Continue.
No, this was Tom Tillis. He's out of North Carolina. He is a squishy Republican at best. He said, we're at 11,000 illegal immigrants per day, or roughly 4 million a year. We've got to get somewhere closer to 2,000 migrants a day, or 700,000 a year. Now my head's spinning, right? Really? We have to do that? We have to let in 2,000 illegals a day?
We could actually just close the border, go back to the stay in Mexico policy, but continue.
Yeah, but he says, but I'm going to take this as a good faith offer that the White House was sending, which is why I think we have to act in good faith and stay in Washington until we can get it negotiated.
Okay, so what I'm trying to understand is what does he mean by negotiated? Because the Republicans don't have the majority in the Senate. So who is negotiating with whom?
Yeah, well, let me back up here. The House actually passed a bill a couple weeks ago, a week or two ago, maybe 10 days. And
Okay.
it was basically that they're not going to agree to anything until basically they get their immigration numbers that they want. And then,
Okay.
and they actually wanted to do Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan in separate bills, and the White House is says no way. It all has to be together because Washington loves an omnibus bill, right? You have to have everything in one bill because, God forbid, we actually do three times the work of
Okay, so
negotiating.
I want to get
So
us back on track because
yeah,
I got a little lost there.
that's okay. So
Okay,
that's my
so all right, so the Mitch McConnell handpicked GOP negotiators.
right.
I'm still not clear. Are they negotiating with the White House?
Yeah, so the White House is negotiating with the senators on hopes of pressuring the House into coming along with what they want. So negotiations for the White House is actually Alejandro Mayorkas, who
Okay.
is the Homeland Security Secretary. And to me, sending him to negotiate a deal on migrants is insane that the Republicans would listen to him. Because how many times over the last 2.5 years has he gone before the House and the Senate and he looked square in the camera and he said, "The border is secure." The border is, well, you can see with your own eyes tens and hundreds of thousands of people flocking across it. So
Okay.
how he's there, but
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Larry, thank you so much for watching on YouTube. We really appreciate it. We are live right now on YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. I think I got them all. And Larry, if you stick with us, we will share your comments directly on the screen, I promise. But first, Edward's going to tell us who these GOP negotiators are and how you feel about them.
So Mitch McConnell, which I have to tell you something, he's not big on border security. He nominated he put on Tom Tillis,
right?
Which, again, never met. He is an absolute shill for the Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
However many workers they want, Tom Tillis will go out and get them. And you got Lindsey Graham, or as we call him, Lindsey Grahamnesty. If you remember his ill-fated days with the Gang of Eight. But anyway,
keep going.
From South Carolina, Lindsey has never met a war that he doesn't like.
Yes.
No question about that. So James Lankford out of Oklahoma, another very squishy moderate. Okay. Yeah, I just will go along with anything that Mitch tells him to do. And surprisingly, Tom Cotton. He's out of Arkansas. He's a conservative, but he is definitely more hawkish than your average conservative out there. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so where do we go from here? You mentioned the Republicans led the House passed a border stabilization bill earlier this month. So what happens next?
Well, yeah, on top of all that money, just as an aside, besides the money that they want for the wars, they also want $14 billion so that they can resettle all these illegal immigrants coming into our country.
Okay.
That's insane.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
All right. So before we do a deeper dive into border concerns, Larry, wow, like so many comments. God bless you, Larry. Let's see. I'm not sure what your question is, but we're going to just pick one because it kind of looks like a question and we'll answer it if we can. Larry says, save all those low-paying jobs the immigrants are stealing.
With a question mark.
With a question mark.
Okay.
I'm not clear what the question is.
I don't either.
Okay. All right. Sorry, Larry. We don't know what the question is. And then he has one more comment. I just want to give Larry his due because he's watching us live. The low-paying jobs are being shipped overseas now, so they make the border a security issue for your votes. I'll answer this, actually. Larry, I'm America first. I think we got to just take care of our own citizens before we open up our border to the entire world. And I've always felt that way. And, when we see so many people who are homeless, and I'm talking about American citizens who are homeless, for me, where I come from this as a kind of borderline, very independent libertarian, I feel like we got to take care of our citizens first. And most other countries, by the way, do.
Yeah.
Most other countries do not have the kind of open borders that we do. And they believe in taking care of their citizens first. So that's where I come from. It's not about getting my vote. It's about, I think America should be first because I'm an American.
Yeah. And you said most other countries don't have the policies that we have. Let me correct that if I may.
Yes.
No other countries have as lax of border security as we have.
Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah. All right. Larry, thank you. We see we had another person watching as well. Thank you for watching live. If you have more questions, throw them in the chat and we will get to them. Let's talk about some of the concerns with having an open border, which means, by the way, you have no border.
Yeah. Yeah. A nation without a border is not a nation.
Right.
Yeah. And obviously with October 7th and whatnot, I think the major concern is terrorism, that terrorists can easily come into our country.
Very easily.
And we are catching some of them, but there's always a exponential number that get away.
Yeah.
And those are called actually the gotaways. So they're coming in. We aren't vetting anybody. They're coming in, they're asking them what their name is, and that's about it.
Yeah.
So here you go.
And then for me, the fentanyl crisis.
Yeah.
I mean, in the past year alone, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection have seized more than 26,000 pounds of fentanyl from our southwest border. And so fentanyl seizures have increased more than 800% in the past 5 years. More than 800%. And this is a recent article this week from USA Today. And I don't think they're a right-wing publication by any means. But for me, it's like, look at how many Americans are dying from fentanyl. And that's coming across our southern border. So for me, that issue alone is a reason to close the border.
Yeah. And I was watching something the other night, and it was somebody from the administration just tugging at the heartstrings of that 75,000 Ukrainians have been killed in this war, and that's why we need to send them money. Well, how many people are dying from fentanyl?
About 100,000.
Yeah.
Americans.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. How about we fight that war here first?
Yes.
Yeah.
So before we talk about more border concerns, because there are many, we do have a great question here from Larry, and I'm going to let you answer this one.
Okay.
So he says, you think conservative politicians don't know exactly what to say and when?
Okay, I'm not sure what the question is.
I think his question is that the four negotiators, that they will say what they have to say to get what they want.
I think,
correct me if I'm wrong, Larry.
Those four, or actually three, Tom Cotton is kind of an outlier, but the other three, they are closer to the Republican wing of the Democratic Party.
Wait, say that one more time. That was awesome.
They are the Republican wing of the Democratic Party, which is basically the uniparty, which kind of runs Washington. And whatever's going to get the money in, it's going to get more, money for us, more money for unions and whatnot. They're all for.
All right, Larry, thank you so much for that question. We do have other border concerns. I'll do the next two and leave the last for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so our healthcare system is completely overwhelmed, especially with ERs. We already know that uninsured Americans typically go to the ER because they don't have a general practitioner. Well, the same thing happens with immigrants coming across the border, illegal immigrants. They go to the ER. School systems, oh my gosh, I'm a former teacher. School systems are totally overwhelmed. They cannot keep up with the sheer number of people and also the diversity in languages.
Well, yeah, and by law, they have to supply
translators. Yes, they have to.
Yes.
So healthcare and school systems totally overwhelmed. What are some other border concerns, Edward?
Well, I think you're seeing it in the bigger cities now is the housing situation, right? You know, in New York originally said, yeah, come on, this is great. And there was Mayor Adams welcoming people off the bus, right? Thank you for coming. And started putting them up at, 4-star and 5-star hotels until the hotels were completely full.
Right.
And then they started trashing hotels and they can't find a place for them. They actually built a tent city out on one of their national parks, and the immigrants are all pissed off because they want to go back to their hotels.
Well, I don't blame them.
Yeah,
I really
right,
don't.
right.
I mean, if
Yeah,
I
you
was,
don't start them out with the 4-star hotel,
Right.
right? You start them out with the tents,
yes,
and then you move them possibly later to that. You
yes,
know?
and and this is not causation, this is correlation, but certainly this attributes to the housing crisis we already have in this country.
Sure, yeah. And how many veterans are homeless on the streets, and which leads to the social services money. The pie is only so big.
That's right.
And you're slicing it now from 10 slices to 20 slices, and everybody's getting less to pay for people who legally shouldn't be here.
Yeah,
it's not right.
Yeah, and there's a great New York Times article that just came out a week ago. Just a great story about immigration on the southern border, how it's affecting Americans, how it's affecting Mexicans who work and live in Mexico. So we're going to put that in the show notes. It's just a really interesting article. And again, I don't think you can argue that the New York Times is some conservative right-wing publication. So hold on, Larry may have one more for us.
A large city that's mostly conservative. Miami. There.
Okay, well, first of all, I don't think people heard that. So one more thing, Larry, and then we're going on to the cost of illegal immigration. And we really would love for you, if you have any comments about what we're talking about, would be great. Larry says, I bet you can't explain why most conservatives don't move out of their hometowns for better education opportunities and form large cities with massive commerce. Again, I think that's a little speculation. And then Larry says, we'll just show his comment. Please name one large city that is mostly conservative. And Edward, would you answer again a little louder, please?
Miami.
Miami. Okay.
Next.
Yes. All right. So again, Larry, we love that you're watching live, but we're going to keep going with the show. We're going to talk about how much is illegal immigration actually costing us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, according to a group called FAIR, which is the Federation for American Immigration Reform, it's going to cost the U.S. taxpayers approximately $150 billion a year. Now, this is 2022 number, so right. I'm sure it's gone up even more.
So how did they arrive at that number? Break it down for us.
Yeah, well, you can, by adding in all the things that we talked about previously on the social services and education and everything, you can add all that stuff up. It basically, there's a gross negative economic impact of $182 billion a year from these illegal immigrants.
Okay, so that's, like you said, it's kind of a gross negative impact. Think
Total
of negative impact. We're out right off the top, 182 billion.
Correct.
And then continue.
Unfortunately, they are only contributing in sales tax and a few other taxes because they don't pay federal taxes if they don't have a social security number. They contribute only $32 billion. So
I'm going to make a point here. So yes, we're not saying illegal immigrants do not pay taxes. Illegal immigrants, yes, sales tax, property tax, probably not income tax unless you have a social security card. But so that is 32 billion. And what does that bring us to?
Yeah, so you take the 32 from the 182, you've got $150 billion negative impact for this country.
Wow.
And a lot of it has to do what you talked about earlier in terms of education, because, here in our country, only 6% of our people don't have high school degrees. Right? I actually thought that was pretty low. Yeah, that's good. That's great. I'm glad to hear that. Now, whatever that actually means in today's world of having a high school diploma, but let's move along.
Yes, move along. That's a whole different show.
6% of Americans don't have it. 40% of illegals coming from, especially the southern border, do not have a high school education. And the reason that is important is the earning power.
Yes,
the earning power of people with at least a minimum of a high school education is way higher than without it. And that is one of the huge disparities on how much tax you're going to pay over your lifetime.
Okay, so since we brought it up, Thurston, welcome, joining us from LinkedIn. So educating is a drawback that can have my taxes. Let me share your comment. We're not saying education is a drawback. No, we're saying it's a plus, and that we have to keep in mind 40% of illegal immigrants don't have a high school education.
Well, that, and you're bringing in tens and hundreds of thousands of children to school systems that can't support it.
Right.
So what are you doing? You're watering down the educational system because they're having to scramble to make all of these adjustments.
Yeah.
Which, who does that hurt? Oh, wait.
Americans.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thurston Baker, first of all, love the name. Thanks for watching live.
Thurston Howell.
Yeah. And Larry has a question. We're going to save it for the end. If Larry's still with us at the end, we'll save it. But now we're on to our fun segment, This Week in Woke.
Yeah.
All right. So what's going on? I always love this because they're kind of fun.
We're going to Beantown, baby. Boston, Massachusetts.
All right, I like Boston.
Yeah, from our friend Milt Harris over at PJ Media.
All right, Milt, we're going to tag you and put it in the show notes. So
the Boston mayor, the headline is Boston mayor throws holiday party for, wait for it, electeds of color only.
Okay. On principle, as a writer, the word electeds makes no fucking sense.
Yeah, that's what they actually call themselves, electeds of color.
All right, continue.
So Boston Mayor Michelle Wu, who is of Asian descent,
okay,
has decided to celebrate the holidays in Jim Crow style. Wu has been serving as mayor since 2021.
Okay, 2 years.
And she decided that only people of color should be invited to a holiday party.
Okay.
Yeah, now the Libs of TikTok actually posted an email that was sent out by a woman named Denise DeSantos, who is the director of city council relations on behalf of the mayor. And DeSantos explained, oh gosh, sorry, the email was mistakenly sent to all city council members, including the white ones. That's a quote.
Okay.
Okay. So she then sent out a second email apologizing for the first by saying that it was only intended for those who were invited, mainly the 6 counselors of color and not the 7 white counselors. Okay, I'm sorry. That sounds like a really small, lame Christmas party. Just does. It does. But what I find fascinating is then they actually get some quotes from these electeds of color council people. They talked to Brian Worrell, he defended the segregated holiday party that would include white people, saying, quote, "We make space and spaces for all kinds of specific groups in the city and city government. This is no different. And the elected officials of color has been around for more than a decade," end quote. So, okay, well, that's a little shocking that we hadn't heard about this sooner. Yeah. Okay, so what did another counselor say about this? Then we go to Tanya Fernandez Anderson, claimed that she also thought that it was totally fine to hold a party segregated by race. In her view, DeSantos, the woman that sent the email, meant no ill will, and there was no need for apologies at all, and the email should not offend anyone. I believe that DeSantos didn't mean any ill will because she didn't mean to send it to the other people. Correct. Yeah. So I believe that's true. But why don't we, I don't know, reverse the races and see how that goes? So let's go to a white mayor who says, we're having a Christmas party and only whites can come. That would not go over well. Yeah, anyway. Now, of course, all you libs out there, Larry and anybody else, you're probably saying, well, that happened in the past and blah, blah, blah. Maybe it did. And you know what? It was wrong then. It's wrong now. You don't fight racism with more racism. Okay. Right? So I find it really funny because Michelle Wu, again, who is Asian American, is married to a white guy. Right. So imagine that conversation. Did she tell him, honey, I got the Christmas party on December 14th. You can't go. And what I also find fascinating, Boston being close to the home of Harvard, right? Mm-hmm. Harvard now labels Asian Americans as white adjacent. So the mayor, oh my God, that is so insulting. Mayor is considered white adjacent, so she shouldn't even be able to attend this party. Yes, but it's not a Harvard party. It's a Boston party. But yeah, that's where we're going with LibThink. And so again, your head want to explode when all you have to do, if you want to see if something is racist, just switch the colors. And if it's wrong on one color, it's wrong on both colors. Okay. All right.
You're welcome. That was a good one.
Okay.
That was a very funny one. And I would love to know her husband's response. Like, really, like, did you really, honey? You thought this was a good idea? All right. So before we wrap up, we are going to take one more comment because Larry has been here the whole show. If you're watching the podcast, it always drops the next day. So we're just putting the comments on the screen. And I think I'm going to take this one, Larry, because it makes no sense to me. So I kind of like it. Please acknowledge that you got yours while the getting was good, and you think that qualifies you for 2023. Larry, God bless you. Or as we like to say in the South,
bless your heart.
Bless your heart, Larry. That's what we say in the South. I don't know what that means. And yours. You got the getting, and the getting was good, and that qualifies you. Well, we're not running for office, so that, at all.
Is that the millions that you have in the bank?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So Larry, I will just say, if your comment means what I think it does, no, you don't know me. You don't know you don't know what's in my bank account. You don't know. But I still appreciate you watching us live and being so super, super interactive. We really appreciate it. Yeah. Anything you want to say to Larry?
No.
Oh, be nice.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you for watching us live. No, seriously. So again, thank you for joining us today. Please follow us on the social media platforms. We are live on most Sundays at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time and 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's the same time, by the way. And yes, we will have a live show a week from today on Christmas Eve.
Yay.
We're going to have a live show. And it's this man, my favorite conservative. It's his birthday. So
I'm an Ever.
Yes, he's a Christmas Ever baby. He's a Christmas baby. So if there's anything you'd like us to talk about, let us know in the comments. Please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast, available wherever you're listening right now. It drops tomorrow or today, depending on when you're listening. And we are going to launch our locals community in the new year. And again, please be sure to follow us on all the socials, myfavoriteconservative.show. That's myfavoriteconservative.show. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Larry.